Hello, I'm Dr. Scott Watier.
And I'm Tommy Welling, and you're listening to the Fasting for Life podcast.
This podcast is about using fasting as a tool to regain your health, achieve ultimate wellness, and live the life you truly deserve.
Each episode is a short conversation on a single topic with immediate actionable steps. We cover everything from fat loss and health and wellness to the science of lifestyle design.
We started Fasting for Life because of how fasting has transformed our lives, and we hope to share the tools that we have learned along the way. Hey everyone, welcome to the Fasting for Life podcast. My name is Dr. Scott Watier, and I'm here as always with my good friend and colleague Tommy Welling. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Hey Scott, how are you?
Doing fantastic, my friend. Excited for today's conversation. We are going to be titling this one, Is Your Metabolic Battery Fried? How Fasting Resets NAD+, NADH, and Insulin Resistance. Some of that stuff you might not be familiar with, but that's okay. Because here is kind of what we're going to be talking about is if your metabolism was a phone battery, most of us are running at 12% and charging it with the wrong cord. So we're going to get into our fasting lifestyle application today. We're going to frame this conversation out from an incredible YouTube video that I was listening to with Dr. Ben Bickman.
Oh, he's great.
Really just give you some actionable steps to really walk through a complex idea of your metabolism and metabolic function and show you how and why fasting works, why carbs matter, and why some people stay stuck even when they do everything right.
Wow.
So, if you're new to the podcast, welcome in. You've joined. If this is your first experience, it's going to be a great conversation today. We want to welcome you into the Fasting for Life ecosystem. If you want to know more about Tommy and I and how fasting transformed our lives, why we do what we do with our weekly podcasts, our challenges, our coaching, all the resources on the fastingforlife.com website, you'll hear our story. And it'll really give you some insight into how and why we operate the way we do and why we do this and why we want you to join us in this fasting lifestyle. If you're a long-term listener, shout out to everybody that's leaving us reviews and comments and sending us questions. We do our best to get to them all. And we'll do our distinct Q&A episodes every 5 to 6 episodes. We'll do a deep dive Q&A. So please keep those comments and engagement going. That truly shows us and keeps us motivated, right? And encourages us and really just lights the fire beneath us to keep doing what we do and hopefully giving you actionable things and real life conversations that you can resonate with and ultimately adopt this fasting lifestyle to lose the weight once and for all, get the results that you are truly looking for. So, Tommy, let's give a shout out. We had a comment on Spotify, which completely, and we'll get into the actual answer to the question in just a minute in the episode. But, Tommy, let's give a shout out before we start.
Sure, yeah. And on Spotify, Brian Holt said, I've been told not to get your heart rate up. This was a comment on one of the recent episodes where we were talking about post-meal walk and how to do that and what was optimal for supporting your fasting lifestyle. And so he said, I've been told not to get my heart rate up directly after eating, and my post-meal walk is usually leisurely, and I may need to pick up the pace, and I enjoy the podcast. So thanks for the comment, Brian, and indirectly the question too that we'll get into a little bit as well. But I can tell you were listening to that episode, thinking about how you could integrate that into your normal day-to-day routine. And I absolutely love that because whenever we take new action, we always see new results. So it doesn't have to be a perfect action and it doesn't have to be groundbreaking either, but a small change can really lead to an additional result that you haven't been seeing, or it can be enough to kind of shake you up out of your comfort zone a little bit and get you thinking along kind of a different path. So kudos to you, Brian, for taking a new action, and we'll give you some clarity on your question there too.
Yep, it aligns exactly with one of the levers, one of our core values here at Fasting for Life. How do we implement the fasting lifestyle? How do we use it as an optimizer to our weight loss and our long-term health journeys? So let's get into today's conversation. And we're going to really, the promise today is you're going to learn like a simple mental model, this metabolic battery kind of type analogy. And you'll see how glucose and some of the decisions we make in terms of stress and sleep and alcohol and food choices, how that overloads and breaks the battery. So you're doing a lot of things right, yet you're not yet, seeing the changes on the scale or in your lab. So you're going to walk away with specific fasting lifestyle targets to recharge it without requiring more supplementation. We'll talk about NAD plus supplements briefly, a little bit about that. But truly, if you've ever felt like you're doing the fasting and the scale and the labs aren't moving, this one's truly going to speak directly to you. And if you know someone that's burned out on the latest supplement, biohacking, whatever, feel free to share this episode with them as well. We think it's going to be really valuable to you. So that's our promise with today's conversation. So Tommy, let's talk about the metabolic battery and kind of just a little bit of the physiology behind, what I was listening to with Dr. Bickman, where he was going deep into the research. But really the idea is if we have weight loss resistance, which then leads to chronic metabolic syndrome or metabolic dysfunction and cardiovascular disease and all these lifestyle-induced conditions that we see in today's world. We talk about a lot of the statistics of people that have metabolic syndrome, labs that are off, blood pressure that's creeping up. What we really want to look at is what is the iceberg analogy. So what is beneath the surface that is not allowing us to see the results that we expect or get the health metrics moving in a way that we want. So where we're coming from is if we just look at excess glucose. So when you eat, that food gets broken down into energy. And when you have high periods of blood sugar or blood sugar volatility, highs and lows and big swings, and then ultimately how that connects to insulin resistance from a metabolic standpoint. So what happens is when you have these elevated periods of blood sugar, that's going to drive chronically high NADH and low NAD+. And we'll explain that in just a second. And what this does is this jams up, like a traffic jam here in Houston, the mitochondrial energy flow, which promotes insulin resistance, which is that weight loss resistance, which leads to all the stuff I just mentioned, via multiple pathways. And it's best fixed by bringing your carbs down, bringing your movement up, to the comment from Brian Holt, right, about his post-meal walk, getting movement up, consistent fasting, intermittent fasting efforts, sleep, and really removing the excess or consistent alcohol intake, not just simply taking an NAD plus supplement. Now, by the way, we have NAD plus in our cabinet downstairs in our pantry, in our supplement shelf, right? So not saying that it can't be helpful, but you truly have the ability to hack this metabolic state and what it looks like to get more efficient mitochondrial function. So the decisions you're making on a day-to-day basis with food and movement and sleep and stress and all of these things, we want to really tap into that mitochondrial efficiency or that metabolic switch to improve your insulin sensitivity and get that energy and that vitality back that you're looking for and take down that metabolic load. And this is where that battery analogy comes into play, Tommy.
Yeah.
So I want to unpack that and then tee up to kind of to talk about what the action steps are going to be. So the battery in itself is, when we look at NAD+, your empty battery is ready and available to pick up that energy from the food that you've ingested. And the NADH is a charged battery carrying energy to your mitochondria, which are the powerhouse energy supply, kind of powerhouses in your cells. When we have a healthy metabolic state, we're going to have a constant charging and discharging of that battery. So kind of like your day-to-day cell phone use, right?
Yeah.
However, when you're feeling wired and tired, crashing after meals, constant cravings, trouble closing your fasting windows, trouble deciding on, hey, I'm going to do a 18-hour fast today, and then you find yourself, eating lunch a few hours later. That's
been there.
Right? We've all been there, right? That's the real world sign that your battery isn't cycling well.
What about?
You know,
I'm sorry. What about the feelings of like I feel like I'm crashing after my meal and I'm not really sure why. So almost like I feel better when I'm fasting, but then I seem to feel worse after I eat, even though I'm really hungry. I have these cravings, but I seem to feel worse afterwards. That's really frustrating too. We hear that a lot.
And here's one of the frustrations we hear too is, you've done the blood work and your labs are okay, or maybe they're slightly elevated, but you truly feel off just drained on a day-to-day basis. Fasting is tough. managing the life stuff, the weekend opportunities, the spousal units, the social interactions, all those things. So we're not by any means trying to turn you into a biochemist. We're giving you a way to understand why the underlying basics that we always talk about: consistent fasting, food choices, movement, sleep, stress, all of that stuff, why it matters so much. So as you're listening, picture your own day like yesterday. Were you helping your battery cycle, or were you jamming it up? And we're going to start from the perspective of this glucose conversation, or this glucose cycle that we have by breaking our fast and having a nutrition opportunity, the food choices we make, and then also the consistent fasting efforts. So whenever you have a nutrition opportunity and you are relying more on carbohydrates, refined processed carbs, sugars, all of those types of things, you're going to be overcharging that battery nonstop. So you're going to have tons of that NADH and not enough of the NAD+. So your energy flow, your body's ability to process that energy kind of gets jammed up. And when that battery is jammed up, your body's going to stop responding to insulin as well. So your insulin sensitivity, right? We've heard about all these GLP-1s, really working on the metabolic insulin resistance sensitivity equation. But your body's going to stop hearing those insulin signals. So you're going to have more elevated times where you have higher blood sugar in the bloodstream longer. What happens when that happens is you're going to have these big energy swings that Tommy alluded to earlier, and that's going to tip the scale into more fat storage, especially in the liver and that visceral fat around the midsection that we always talk about. So plateaued weight gain around the midsection, elevated fasting glucose, or maybe an A1C that's kind of creeping up. Afternoon crashes, brain fog. This is not a fasting willpower problem. It's a metabolic battery problem created by this volatility in your blood sugar. So, same calories, different timing and carb load. You're going to see improvements in that day-to-day energy battery cycling, right? Getting your battery recharged. So we need to change the inputs, but also understand why the outputs aren't working in certain cases, right?
And so whenever we're thinking about our actual fasting timing with respect to those nutrition opportunities, so think back a few episodes ago, we spoke specifically about fast cycling and about your foundational fasting. If we think about it in a way that's like, what did we bring in during our nutrition opportunity? How long is it going to take to burn through that fuel in that high NADH state? Right, so that we can make it back into an NAD plus a higher NAD plus concentration state. That's going to take some time, and the more I ate during my nutrition opportunity, the longer it's going to take. And it's not to say that you should be eating like a bird or like a rabbit during your nutrition opportunity. Absolutely not. But understanding the balance between what you ate and how much you consumed, like on a calorie basis wise, and then also on an insulin response scale as well, because the higher the insulin response to that meal, that means you're going to put more of that fuel away as stored glycogen, and then push you more into a fat storage state rather than what we want to be in, which is more of a fat burning state. We want to be more of a fat burning machine, right? Even during maintenance, we want to stay on the right side of that equation. And so if you think about it like that, and you have let's say it's a large OMAD meal, especially if it's later in the day, you're a little more insulin resistant later on in the day, you have a large OMAD meal, maybe it's 50, 60, 70% of your caloric needs. It's going to take a while for you to burn through that. It might take 16 hours. It could be 14, could be 18 hours, whatever it is. That means that you're going to spend most of that time in a higher NADH state. And then it's going to take time.
So ultimately your battery's not recharging. It's already full.
Right. And so, and you don't have that metabolic switching happening that leads to greater metabolic optimization that decreases your insulin resistance and raises your insulin sensitivity. And this is what we want. And so oftentimes there's a mismatch between the balance of what we're eating and how much and the timing of it versus our fasting time. And so sometimes that's why the scale feels more stuck, because it's pushing us into this high NADH state. And we really didn't realize that. And we can continue in that pattern for a while, and it gets frustrating. But oftentimes that's one of the sources for a high NADH environment, right?
And this is going to result in that 3 to 5 pound kind of, you're doing a lot of things right. You're just not seeing the labs or the scale move consistently.
Sure.
And you're waiting for that, man, I feel good most days type feeling, because that's what we hear a lot when you get a consistent fasting lifestyle is, man, you're firing a lot of days.
Mm-hmm.
And this is that metabolic kind of underpinning beneath the surface that leads to that insulin resistance. So one of the things that you'll hear out there is like, okay, well, supplements or optimizations, or should I be taking ketones or whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
The NAD plus, is a great anti-aging longevity type supplement. NMN, IV NAD plus.
Mm-hmm.
All of those things are mechanistically interesting, and there is some animal data for it. But when you're looking for an external solution to an internal problem, this is why I don't use NAD plus consistently. I'll cycle it in and out of my supplement stack. Because it really hasn't been shown, even though we're talking about this battery analogy, and if we can just skew this equation in the right way, right, the NAD plus, it hasn't really shown to really do much in terms of fixing obesity or insulin resistance or day-to-day energy, brain fog, fatigue problems, right? Because if you're just putting more of the NAD plus into the system, you're just really adding more battery packs to a device that you never actually unplug. So what do we know with fasting? What do we know with a fasting lifestyle to restore that battery? Well, we need to lower refined carbs and sugar, right? So this is the low carb, not no carb scenario for most people. You have to have clean periods of intermittent fasting. You have to have movement that creates the energy demand, right? That's why we talk about body composition and resistance training and walking, tapping into those fat stores and skewing this battery equation in your favor.
Absolutely.
And then absolutely protecting your sleep and cutting back on alcohol, because those are the things that reduce the NADH overload and let your NAD plus do its job again. So it's interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say alcohol is an interesting one too, because a lot of times we think about it as, okay, it's just something else that's potentially in my window, or maybe it's an occasional, kind of thing, and it creates a window rather than a dinner meal by itself. If it's later on in the day, that kind of thing. But a better way to think about it is that it is pushing your biochemistry towards a more NADH environment, right? A higher concentration. So what it's doing, it's going to be pausing the fat loss process. It's going to be creating a big urgent job for your liver to do as far as detoxification goes. Your body is not concerned at all with the fat burning process, even in a low calorie environment when there's alcohol to detoxify. That's job number one, because at high enough concentrations, it is poison for the body, right? And so that's a very substantial job. And so just understanding that is changing the biochemistry, at least temporarily speaking, for a few hours, most likely, depending on the volume of the intake, is really important to know, because depending on how frequent those sessions are, it really can keep us stuck and keep us feeling in like a lower energy state, because we're almost borrowing energy. The intake of alcohol is almost borrowing the efficiency of the biochemistry and like later on in the day's energy or tomorrow's energy. I'm kind of borrowing that for right now, because I'm pausing the metabolic creation of feeling energized, right?
Yeah, and the reality is we don't want to have too many fully charged batteries, and we not enough of the empty ones that actually give us the energy output that we want. So the mitochondria get overwhelmed, and that's the thing that leads to higher blood sugar and insulin. And we'll talk about CGMs and A1C in just a minute, because we want to connect this back to labs. You then have more fat stored in the liver, that short-term glycogen and fatty liver, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which we've done episodes on in the past. And then you get that visceral adiposity around the organs, which is the stuff we don't want. And then you get the damage to the blood vessels, eyes, nerves, kidneys over time, because you've got that constant inflammatory response that's going on as well from this literally not being able to flip your switch, right? So eating fewer refined carbs and sugars, that's going to lead to less NADH overload. You're going to move your body. So a post-meal walk after your largest meal or your highest carb meal of the day, that's going to allow your muscles to burn off the NADH and regenerate the NAD plus naturally. You're going to use your fasting and time-restricted eating windows to give your cells a break from the constant onslaught of blood sugar, right? and it's going to help reset that battery balance. And then we're going to focus on sleep and cutting out the alcohol, like you were just talking about, because that's going to allow your battery to continually cycle on and off, which is what we want. So when we look at this from a blood sugar standpoint or an A1C standpoint, A1C is good, and it should be used as kind of a lag measure. But the problem with A1C is that it doesn't show you the changes or the volatility in your blood sugar on a day-to-day basis, which lead to the cravings, the inconsistent fasting windows, the later meals, the snacking, the grazing, the weekend warrioring, right? Going off, kind of just forgetting your fasting lifestyle on the weekends. And I see this with my wife too, is it's not a willpower problem, it's a physiology problem. And I'll explain this in just a second, because she's a rock star. She's very consistent. She tracks, she does all of her stuff, right? So she's like one of those unicorns that is really diligent with this, and that's what gets her results, and it works for her long term. But for a lot of us, that doesn't work because the results don't match and we get frustrated and we quit. So this underlying metabolic issue is what shows up in those day-to-day decision makings around your fasting and your food choices. And we did an episode where we talked about leptin and the lag effect on the brain. So we had a recent situation where my wife had a traumatic TBI, a severe TBI. And we were doing a lot more keto focus to promote ketones, to promote brain function and repair. And then we had a social engagement where we went to a Mexican restaurant. And the tortillas ended up coming home with us. And she had 4 or 5 extra tortillas the next day. Yeah. And what happened was her cravings and her energy and everything tanked, and her cravings went way up because she overloaded the system. So now it takes her 3 days to get back on track and actually feel like herself again. And that's what happened with me with alcohol, is even when I would just have a couple of drinks on a date night, I had this lag effect because I was messing with the battery cycles, right? I was overloading the system and throwing the system out of balance. So it would take me 3 or 4 days. If we went on a date night on Friday, it took me until Tuesday to feel normal again and actually feel confident in my day-to-day decisions.
Wow.
So what we don't want is that volatility. We want to look at how can we create sustainability. So an A1C over 90 days is good, but it doesn't tell you what a CGM can tell you, which is the decisions you're making with your food, your fasting, your sleep, your exercise, your water intake. The CGM is going to give you an actual outline or flow chart of what's going on with your blood sugar volatility, and is your battery actually discharging and recharging properly.
That's great. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, the 3-month average CGM shows you the movie. The CGM shows you the movie, not just the final score. So you're going to look at post-meal spikes, time above 130 to 140, how quickly you come back to baseline. So a CGM is a really great tool if you're struggling with this kind of analogy, right? How we frame this conversation today. You're doing a lot of things right. You're just not seeing the results you're expecting in your labs or in the scale or in your day-to-day energy levels.
Exactly.
A CGM is going to give you real-time input into the decisions and the things and the lifestyle kind of applications that you're doing on a day-to-day basis. And it will give you a really great way to kind of hone in on, hey, what should I be doing? To Brian Holt's question, maybe I need to be upping my intensity in my post-meal walk.
Yeah, and remember, we were striking a good balance between that intensity where you could talk for 20 to 30 minutes, but it was brisk enough to where your heart rate is elevated, right? You weren't just it wasn't just super low like at my lowest gear as far as the walk goes, but also not so intense that I couldn't carry on a conversation during that 20 or 30 minute time period. So that's really like the sweet spot to be. And your body has plenty of time after that walk to focus on rest and digestion. And so maybe that's where the concern kind of came from, or that kind of old adage, like, no, you just need to just chill out after a meal so that you can properly focus on rest and digestion. But really, like, you've you've fueled up, especially like you said, during the larger meal, after the larger meal, or after your most carb rich meal, you really dumped a lot of fuel into the bloodstream. And so to actually mobilize some of that fuel and get the body's biochemistry not just on, hey, we're just trying to deal with all of this blood sugar, but you're actually utilizing the largest sink for that blood sugar in your whole body, which is all of your muscular cells. So as many muscle cells as you can activate is going to help clear some of that excess blood sugar out very, very quickly. And that process is going to continue for a while, even after that walk is over. So with your elevated heart rate. And so that's where you find kind of that sweet spot. And so if you're wearing a CGM, or if you're wearing a CGM, you can take a fast that you're very comfortable with, or that feels relatively easy for you. Start on the lower side. You can start with maybe a 12 or a 14 or a 16-hour fast. See how your blood sugar is responding, but also take note of what's happening, like you said, Scott, right after your meal. Like, what does that look like? The more volatile and the larger these spikes and the bigger the overcompensation afterwards, these are a sign that you're really not charging the battery so that you can continue to extend and prolong and utilize that fuel. But really, you're having these little flashes in the pan, almost like you're just walking around with no battery on your phone, and you're just having to carry around the charging cable with you. And every time you want to send a text message, you have to plug it in for a minute, let it fire up, and then you can fire off that text message. But as soon as you need to leave that location, okay, well, you have to unplug it and your phone dies again. So it's kind of like every nutrition opportunity is, I finally feel a little bit of energy, but then it doesn't stay with me. And maybe you even crash after that too. And it doesn't have to be that dramatic, but that might be kind of like worst case scenario. But somewhere in between that versus I just feel energized and like I'm in a flow state and like I'm firing on all cylinders, no brain fog.
Decisions are easy. I'm making good food choices. I'm going to bed on time.
Right. Yeah. Right. I'm not fighting my cravings all the time. That would be optimal. The other thing that I just described would be like, at a zero, like on the other side of the spectrum. And then somewhere in between might be how you feel some of the time. But we can use these data points from the CGM, for example, to kind of get some insight as far as when do I feel like I'm at my worst, and correlate it with some of my decisions, and then I can start taking some different actions too, right? Which is that's how we make incremental improvements over time.
And the starting point today was it wasn't a willpower problem, right? Mm-hmm. It wasn't a fasting lifestyle problem. It's not a willpower problem. It's a battery energy recharge problem, right? So when we're looking at the action steps that you can take from a implementation standpoint, you're going to pick your fasting window, right? You're going to decrease the number one lever that messes with the battery recharging NAD plus NADH system of your mitochondria. So you're going to give your body time to decrease glucose and decrease insulin and help you shift to fat burning rather than glucose management, right? 24-hour glucose management. That's why fasting is such a powerful lever, and it should be the primary one that we use. So pick your fasting window. If you're looking for more, like what does that look like? If you're newer, you've been off and you want to get back on, you can grab the Blueprint to Fasting for Fat Loss. It's in the show notes. It's a 20-page PDF. It gives you different schedules. But really pick that window and just say, you know what? I'm going to do this for this week. This is going to be my fasting schedule. And then when you break your fast, build your meals around protein and real food carbs, right? So don't start building your plate with the carbohydrates or the refined processed, ultra-processed stuff, the convenient foods, the DoorDash foods, the Instacart foods, all that.
Right.
Not Instacart, DoorDash and what's the other
Uber
one?
Eats.
Uber Eats, thank you.
Yeah.
So protein paste, real carbs, real healthy natural carbs, and healthy fats. So cut back on the sugars and the bag box barcodes type stuff, because that's going to help keep your glucose in your battery able to charge and recharge. And then we want to get movement every single day. And that's simply, we did an episode recently about, just doing the walk after your largest meal or your heaviest carb meal. If you have to eat out and the options aren't great, or it's a business lunch, or you're traveling, just get your walk in after that largest meal, and make sure that we're really looking at how we can add a simple 20 to 30 minute resistance training exercise workout in 2 to 3 times a week. Because to your point, Tommy, that's going to help your muscles soak up that glucose, right, and recharge those batteries. So fasting window, protein-based meal, movement, simply a walk after your largest meal, and a couple 2 to 3 resistance training workouts a week. We're going to absolutely protect your sleep. For me, it's a consistent bedtime and no big meals. For me, it's 3 hours, but 2 to 3 hours before bed. Because what that's going to do is allow that overnight fast to help repair and recharge your metabolic battery.
Yeah.
And then, Tommy, you already talked about it as well. For me, alcohol is no longer in the picture. But limit alcohol or choose alcohol-free days so you're not constantly draining the NAD plus and jamming your liver metabolism up on top of the blood sugar volatility and glucose overload, right?
That's a great way to think about it. Not so much that you're needing to say no more, but like choosing intentionally when you're going to say yes. So that's really psychologically, that sounds like a very small shift or maybe even a silly one. But really what we're doing there is we're leveraging the I want power over the I won't power or your willpower, which is really a proven very, very effective tool, surprisingly effective, actually. And just one more point on consistency, because when we're thinking about charging this battery and our NAD plus, NADH, and it's not something that you can necessarily know your concentrations of NAD plus in real time, but you really don't have to. We can interpret this data from how you feel, what your CGM looks like, and how your numbers are responding to your meals, to your sleep, to your fasting times. But so often we hear and we feel the temptation of, I just need a longer fast. In order to feel better, I just need a longer fast. Well, a lot of times that's because we're finding ourselves not so consistent with our shorter or our more just kind of run-of-the-mill fast, if you will, our 16, our 18, our maybe 20-hour fast, maybe even an occasional OMAD here and there, 22, 23-hour fast. So as we get more consistent with those, we can be fixing these battery charging issues without the need to feel tempted by like just needing another 72-hour fast, let's say, for example. A 72-hour fast is a great muscle to flex. It's a great tool to sharpen. But if it feels like that's the only time when things are working, we have some more work to do. And a lot of times we can
need more
do
repetitions.
More repetitions, better repetitions.
Yes.
Probably more food choice repetitions, and taking a look at how do different amounts and different quality and different types of foods actually make me feel before and after a fast. And when I start noting that, maybe a little bit of journaling, you can grab some of the journal pages on the resource page at thefastingforlife.com and do that for a few days. You might be surprised at how certain things correlate with how you feel, because we oftentimes forget those kind of things within about a day or two. And so if you write one down, just take a few minutes and you can start drawing some conclusions between the choices that I make and then how I end up feeling. And we can make some serious inroads on correcting that metabolic battery of yours.
Yep. And if you're looking for a CGM, legislation has changed. You can get them over the counter now. Mm-hmm. You can look at something like Abbott Lingo or just search Lingo. That's a great place where you can get it. So if you're looking for that, it's not forever, but it is a short-term tool that will really show you this NADH, NAD plus battery analogy that we talked about today. Mm-hmm. The meal choices, the movement, the sleep, the decision around alcohol, processed foods, your daily fasting, you'll be able to see in real time. So 2 to 4 weeks of using that is going to give you way more insight than an A1C will, which is just that lag measure. So this is really interesting in the fact that, where we started the conversation was you're doing everything right, you're just not seeing the changes yet. Well, sometimes we just need to get a little bit more granular, not in the biochemistry world, but in the actions that we're taking on a day-to-day basis and how we're seeing ourselves show up from an energy, decision-making, and willpower standpoint. So
absolutely.
If you remember nothing else from today, remember this. Every time you narrow your eating window, choose real food over processed foods or sugar-laden foods, move your body, protect your sleep, dial back alcohol. You're giving your metabolic battery a chance to reset. Mm-hmm. And that's how fasting stops being the next diet hack or diet mentality and starts becoming a sustainable fasting lifestyle. And ultimately, that's what we want, Tommy. So as always, man, I appreciate the conversation, and we will talk soon.
Thank you. Bye. So, you've heard today's episode, and you may be wondering, where do I start? Head on over to thefastingforlife.com and sign up for our newsletter, where you'll receive fasting tips and strategies to maximize results and fit fasting into your day-to-day life.
While you're there, download your free Fast Start guide to get started today. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review, and we'll be back next week with another episode of Fasting for Life.